I want to welcome you back to Thrive in the Word. I'm so glad that you've joined us today as we study from the Word of God. And we're studying now from the book of 1 John, and we're in the second chapter, and we're going to look at the last two verses of this chapter today, verses 28 and 29. And this is what it says in the New Living Translation. And now, dear children, remain in fellowship with Christ, so that when he returns, you will be of full courage and not shrink back from him in shame. Since you know that Christ is righteous, we also know that all who do what is right are God's children. Now, I want you to notice the way that John starts verse number 28. He says, now, dear children. You see, John is an older man at this time, and he is the spiritual father to many of these people. And John is just, we see this wonderful relationship that he has with the people. And he says, dear children. In other words, he's writing to them with a heart that's so full of affection. And that it's not just regular affection, it's this fatherly affection, this fatherly love for the people. Now, let me go back and just say this, just in case you haven't been listening to all of our podcasts. John has been talking very straight. Now, some people would say he's been very harsh. He's called people out. He's called them the Antichrist. He's called them liars and things like that. And some people would say, well, that's harsh. But you know what? We don't see any harshness in John. What we see is a whole lot of love in John. And he starts out this verse 28 by saying, now, dear children, and this is what he says, remain in fellowship with Christ, so that when he returns. Now, what's he talking about? First of all, he says remain in fellowship. That means a close relationship. That means communion with him. That means companionship. That means partnership with Christ. Remain in that place. And by the way, let me just go back to a couple verses back. The way that you remain in fellowship with Jesus is by being faithful to his word, by being faithful to the things that were taught by Jesus and by the apostles. So he says, remain in fellowship with Christ, so that when he returns, now what does that mean? That means Jesus is coming again. You see, John didn't doubt this one bit. John knew that Jesus was coming back again. And so he's saying, I'm doing this so not only so that you can enjoy life, we talked about that already, but he's saying, I'm doing this so that when Jesus returns, and then what does he say? He says that when he returns, you will be full of courage and not shrink back from him in shame. You know what? I believe that when Jesus returns, he's going to return for a church. But not all of the church is going to be able to walk boldly in front of him. Do you understand? There's going to be some people in the church that are going to lack courage on the day that Jesus returns. Why? Because they haven't remained in fellowship with him. And again, the key to remaining in fellowship with him is to be faithful to what he taught. Do you understand? Now, I'm not saying they're going to hell. If you are in relationship with Jesus, you are going to go to heaven. But when Jesus returns, are you going to be welcoming him? Or are you going to be, oh my, I could have done more. Are you going to put your hands over your face in shame and say, oh, Jesus, I was so wrong? Well, how can you be guaranteed that you won't do that? By walking in fellowship with him. And how can you guarantee that fellowship? We're going back by keeping the word of God faithfully in your life. So John writes here, and he says that you will be full of courage. You know what? I'm looking forward to the day that Jesus returns. I'm looking forward to the time where I can walk and stand before him in confidence, in boldness, in courage. Why? Because I've maintained my fellowship with him. I know him. I've been walking with him. I've been in partnership with him. I've been maintaining this fellowship, and so I can have full courage. Now, I've been with people as they've met Jesus. Now, I'm not talking about meeting Jesus as far as in an altar call or a witnessing on the street. I've been with people as they've passed from this life into the next. And you know what? There is such courage. My dear father was a wonderful, wonderful believer. But you know what? He was looking forward to seeing Jesus. Well, same thing with my mother. They were looking forward to seeing Jesus with such boldness. I remember one time sitting by my father's bedside, and he was kind of in and out of consciousness. And while he was laying there, his legs were just turning like 1,000,000 miles an hour. And when he came back into consciousness, I said, "Dad, what are you doing?" And he says, "I'm running towards Jesus." Oh, you can have that kind of confidence. You can have that kind of courage if you walk in fellowship, partnership, companionship with Jesus. You won't shrink back in shame. You won't say, "Oh, I should have done, I could have done." But you'll walk with courage and with boldness. Now, verse number 29. Since we know that Christ is righteous, we also know that all who do what is right are God's children. Now, John is bringing this teaching against the antichrists to a close, against false religions. And he's saying this is how we know. We know that people who do what is right, who do what is righteous, that they are God's children. You see, John is writing this, and he's writing this as a warning. He's writing this to teach the people how to know what's right and how to know what's wrong. And he boils it down in this last verse. He says, since we know that Christ is righteous, then we also know that all who do what is right are God's children. Jesus is righteous, and those who follow Jesus will walk in righteousness. They will walk in this place of being right with God. And by looking at their lives, we will know that they are God's children. I want to leave you with this challenge today. Do the people that are around you know that you are God's child? How will they know? Because you walk in righteousness.